Story 1. I worked the overnight shift at a gas and go off Route 9 for about 2 years. 11 at night to 7 in the morning, 4 days a week. It's boring work, mostly. You restock the coolers, you mop, you sell cigarettes and energy drinks to truckers and the occasional insomniac. I actually liked it. The quiet suited me, and my manager Denise let me keep a little space heater under the counter in winter. The thing that still keeps me up started on a Tuesday in February. A gray Camry pulled into pump 6 a little after 1 in the morning. Older model, nothing special. I only clocked it because the light over 6 had been flickering for weeks, and I noticed anything that parked under it. Nobody got out. That's not strange by itself. People pull in to check their phones, take a call, sleep off a long drive. I went back to my crossword. But when I looked up, maybe 40 minutes later, the Camry was still there, dark, and I couldn't see anyone in the driver's seat. I figured they were reclined, sleeping it off. I didn't know yet that I'd be looking at that car until sunrise. By 3, it hadn't moved. Company policy said no loitering past 30 minutes, so I zipped my coat and walked out to knock on the window and tell them to move along. Halfway across the lot I could already see the car was empty. Both front seats, the back, empty. I put my hand on the hood anyway. The engine was warm. Not just parked warm. Running recently warm. I stood there in the cold with my breath fogging up, telling myself the driver had walked to the gas station bathroom, except I'd have seen them come in. There was only one door, and it faced my counter. I went back inside and I watched that car on the little security monitor by the register. And this is the part one have never been able to explain. On the screen, there was a man standing at the driver's door of the Camry. Just standing there, facing the store, his hands at his sides. I looked up, out the rear window, straight at pump 6. Nothing. No one. I looked back at the monitor. He was still there. I looked up again. Empty lot. I did that maybe 6 times, back and forth, and every time it was the same. On the screen, a man. Through the glass, nobody. My hands were shaking so bad I knocked my coffee into the lottery display. And here's the thing I didn't want to admit to myself. Each time I looked back at that screen, the man was a little closer to the store. Not walking. I never once caught him moving. But the first time he'd been at the car, and then he was halfway across the lot, and then he was standing by the ice freezer right outside the door, always facing me, always with his hands at his sides. By the time I made myself stop looking, he was close enough that I could have told you the color of his jacket, if the picture hadn't been so grainy. I called Denise. She didn't pick up. I called the non-emergency police line and a bored dispatcher said they'd send someone when a unit was free. I sat on the floor behind the counter where I couldn't see either the window or the monitor, and I stayed there. When the sky finally started going gray around 6, I made myself stand up. The Camry was gone. No sound of an engine, no headlights sweeping the lot, and I'd have heard it, I was 10 feet from the door. It was just gone, like it had never been there. I almost convinced myself I'd dreamed the whole thing. Then I went to unlock the front door for the morning, and I saw it. On the inside of the glass, at about the height of a grown man's hand, there was a handprint. Fingers spread. Pressed flat against the glass. From the inside. On my side of the locked door. Story 2. The summer I turned 19, I babysat for the Hargroves, a couple 2 streets over from my parents. They had a 6-year-old named Eli. Good kid, obsessed with dinosaurs, needed the same 3 books every night before bed. Easy money. I'd been sitting for them since May and nothing had ever gone wrong. One night in August they went to a wedding 2 towns over and said they'd be back late, maybe 1 in the morning. Eli and I did the usual. Mac and cheese, half a movie, the dinosaur books. I put him down at 8:30 and he went easy, no fuss. Around 10 I was on the couch when I heard his feet at the top of the stairs. He was standing there in his dinosaur pajamas, rubbing one eye, and he said, "There's a man in the backyard who waves like Daddy." I didn't know yet that Mr. Hargrove was still 40 miles away. I told him it was probably a dream, but I went and looked anyway, because that's what you do. I flipped on the porch light and the motion floods over the deck. The backyard was empty. Just the swing set and the grill under its cover and the fence. I told Eli, "See, nobody there," and I walked him back to bed and sat with him until his breathing went slow. On my way out of his room I stopped in the doorway, because something felt wrong and it took me a second to place it. His window. The blinds were up. I always closed them at bedtime, it was part of the routine, and I'd closed them that night. I know I did, because I'd made a joke about the dinosaur on the cord. I crossed the room and lowered them again and I told myself I'd just forgotten. I did not look out the glass while I did it. I don't know why. I just knew I didn't want to. I'd been back downstairs maybe 20 minutes when he called down, not scared, just matter of fact, the way kids report things. He's at the door now. He says he forgot his key and can you let him in? I checked the front door first, then the back. Both locked, deadbolts thrown, nobody on either side. I even opened the front door and stepped out onto the step and looked up and down the street. Empty. Parked cars, a dog barking somewhere, nothing else. That's when my phone lit up. It was Mrs. Hargrove, calling to say they were running late, the reception was dragging, they wouldn't be home until closer to 2. I asked her, trying to keep my voice normal, whether her husband had maybe driven back early. She laughed and said no, he was right next to her, she was watching him lose at the photo booth. So there was no man. There was no one who waved like Daddy, because Daddy was 40 miles away losing at a photo booth. I went up the stairs fast. Eli was sitting up in bed, calm, looking toward his open bedroom door and the dark hallway behind me. I said his name. He didn't look at me. He was looking past my shoulder, at the hallway, and he smiled a little, the way you smile when you recognize somebody. He came inside, Eli said. He's standing right behind you. He's smiling like Daddy. And then he tilted his head. But his smile is too big for his face. I spun around. The hallway was empty. I swear to you it was empty. But behind me, in his little bed, I heard Eli lift his hand. And wave. Story 3. My wife and I bought our first house last spring. A 1960s ranch that had belonged to the same old couple for almost 50 years. It came with all this dated stuff we thought was charming, including a wired intercom system, a little speaker box mounted on the wall of every room, each one with a push-to-talk button and a dial to choose which room you were calling. The home inspector told us it hadn't worked in decades. We left the boxes up because tearing them out meant patching plaster we didn't have the budget for. For the first month, nothing. Then one night in October, my wife was away at her sister's, and I was up late doing dishes. The intercom box on the kitchen wall crackled. Just a dry burst of static, maybe 2 seconds, then it clicked off. Old wiring, I figured. A short. Houses settle, wires do things. I didn't know yet that the dial on the kitchen box was turned to basement, and I had never once gone down there at night. I only noticed the dial because I went to tap the box, the way you smack an old TV. It was set to basement. I turned it back to OFF and I stood there a second longer than I needed to, because I was sure, I was completely sure, I'd never touched that dial in my life. It crackled again an hour later. Longer this time. And under the static, right at the edge of it, there was a sound like someone breathing close to a microphone. Slow. Wet. I told myself it was the pipes, or feedback, or the wind in the old ductwork, and I turned the dial to off again, harder, and I went to bed with the hallway light on like a kid. I lay there a long time listening to the house. Old houses are never really quiet. There's always the tick of the baseboard heat, the settle of the frame, the fridge kicking on. But that night, underneath all of it, I kept hearing what I decided was the furnace cycling down in the basement. On, and off. On, and off. Except a furnace doesn't have a rhythm like that, slow and even and patient, and somewhere around 2 in the morning I stopped calling it the furnace, because it had started to sound a lot more like something down there was learning how to breathe. The third time, it woke me up. The bedroom box, this time, the one over the nightstand that I'd never heard make a single sound. Static, and then a voice. Low, and calm, and almost kind. It said, "Come down and turn the water off before it floods." That's the part that got me, honestly. It wasn't a scream or a threat. It was a helpful thing to say. A reasonable thing. The kind of thing that makes you swing your legs out of bed before your brain catches up and asks how a broken intercom knows your basement, and why it wants you down there in the dark at 3 in the morning. I did not go down. I want that on the record. I sat on the edge of the bed with my heart going and I did not go down those stairs. The box clicked. The dial, I could see it from the bed in the hall light, turned itself from basement back to off. And then the voice, quieter, the last thing it ever said, used my name. Just my name, the way my wife says it when she's already annoyed I didn't answer the first time. In the morning I went to the garage and got a pair of wire cutters, and I opened every box in the house and cut the wires and pulled the little speakers out and put them in a trash bag in the bin at the curb. No power to any of it. Dead copper. That afternoon, standing in the kitchen with the empty box still screwed to the wall, wires cut, nothing behind it, I watched the dial turn one more time, slow, all the way over to basement. And then it stopped. We put the house back on the market 3 weeks later. If you're the family that bought the ranch off Delmore Street, and the intercom ever crackles, I'm sorry. Don't answer it. And don't go down. If this one got under your skin, subscribe. There are more true ones where this came from, and I'll be telling them.